welcome to Watch It Paint It. This week we're going to be painting Lil Ned from Massive Darkness. I say we're going to be painting, Benson's going to be doing this paint job and I'm going to do the commentary over the top. So this week we got the new record on the channel for the most likes within a week for a video for Kunha. So what we thought this week is if we can big up Benson, if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up below. If you don't, leave us a comment, let us know why. And if we get more than 50 likes on this video, Benson's going to do a second video this month. So let's get on with the painting. So that was just showing the model primed in white, and Benson's favours the Citadel paint. So you're going to see some different paints on this video, starting with Cadian Fleshtone. This you could just use the Survivor shader if you've got the Zombicide set that I more primarily use. They're fairly similar. This is slightly darker, and on the card the model's quite light Fleshtone, so either will do, just more highlighting up of this tone. So we're painting on his back there, his chest, his arm, his feet and his ankle, between all the straps on his sandals there. A bit of arm showing through behind his armour there. Don't forget his face, that's very important when painting skin. His hands as well. Benson's using the base brush, which is very similar to the Army Painter's Regiment brush, but it's by Games Workshop there. So next Benson's going to be moving on to painting the bone colours on his shoulder there. He's got some sort of skull attached to him, and he's using Karak stone by Citadel here. There's several alternatives to this, but the Army Painter one I'd be using zombie skin for this tone here. You can also find another skull on his thigh that's showing through there, so paint that skull in the same colour. And again, Benson's using the Citadel base brush here, which is about the same as the Regiment brush by the Army Painter. He's going to be moving on to the Steel Legion Drab here. This is Citadel's sort of light-ish brown, very similar to the leather brown from both Vallejo's and the Army Painter's version. So this is to paint on all of the little bags that he's got around his waist, just hanging from his belt there. So painting on all of the little loops that would wrap around the belt in the same colour. Again, this is with the base brush, the Regiment brush. It's the base coat, and this is a fairly large model, the biggest hero I've got at least. I don't know if there are bigger heroes from Zombicide, but this is the biggest hero I own. So he's also painted on the staff for the hammer, the shaft for the hammer there, in the same colour, the same brown. Just having a little rest and topping back up on paint, no doubt, and carrying on with that. So he's going to be using Polished Gold by Vallejo. This is to do the hammerhead, again with the base brush, and he's just applying a thin, even coat all over the hammerhead. The gold doesn't take as well as many of the other colours, so off camera he'll be doing a second coat of that one, definitely. He's going to be using Charred Brown, the dark brown by Vallejo that I often use, and this is to do his whatever they are. Are they horns? Are they coming out of his helmet or out of his head? Let's go for helmet. Yep, so that's for the two horns attached to his helmet there. What purpose they serve, I've got no idea. Anybody know? Leave that in the comments below. So he's going to be using the same charred brown for some of the other parts of the model. There's this little piece of sort of leather that seems to be hanging from the model, as well as the sheath for his sword. So these are both in charred brown there. Still using the base brush, just being quick and relatively careful, especially on the sandal here around his foot, which you've already painted, so extra care on the straps there. But again, still using the base brush, so this is quite easy. Just make sure to use the tip of the base brush when applying those lines there. He's going back to Cadian Fleshtone. I might be pronouncing some of these paints wrong, so I apologise for that. I'm not used to them and I've never heard them said before, but here he's just painting back in anywhere that he's messed up on those straps, as well as it looked like he'd missed his right foot. So next up he's base coating the metal that Ned's got on his person. So he's using Leadbelcher here by Citadel again. Still with the base brush, the Regiment brush. There's quite a few little areas on Lil Ned to cover in this paint. So he's got his elbow pad there, his sort of wrist guard, his gauntlet, as well as this shoulder metal that he's got, belt buckle across his chest, and the helmet. Mostly making it up on the back there, but trying to make it look realistic. Trying to work out where the helmet and cloth intertwine and meet together somewhere. So on his other arm, yeah, he's got those metal spikes, which you just saw painting there. Next up is Dark Fleshtone, this is by Vallejo, and this is to paint on some of the other browns on his person. So that's the belt strap that's going across his chest, and he's also got one down his side above his skirt there. So just giving it a different tone of brown. And he's also got a belt around his waist, which is much more visible from behind, so make sure you paint that in as well. Straken green next by Citadel, and this is to give the base coat on the hood from his helmet, as well as the skirt, the cloth he's wearing around his waist there. So we're still on the base coat here, and just applying a thin, even coat all over that hood there. Oh, he's also wearing a sleeve down his side. Yeah, forgot about that bit. So painting in between all the bits you've already painted. Taking a lot more care now because the majority of the model is based, so you don't want to be getting this paint on anywhere you've painted. Having said that, I think I would have painted in this green before I did any of those belt straps and anything that sits on top of this green. I would paint in afterwards. Benson may have been saving time on the video by doing it all in one go, but when you're doing this in person, I'd be painting that sheath in afterwards, as well as those straps around it on the other side. So maybe that's just personal preference, and Benson and myself have obviously got different styles. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments which way around would you do it, and is there any bonus to either? So next up's Desert Yellow. This is by Vallejo. This is the sort of sandy, yellowy brown colour, and this is to highlight up the skirt. So he's applying this at the base coat level. He's going to be blending this in. So he's applying this to probably about a third of the model from the outside of the skirt inwards. He's taking the Desert Yellow and the Straken green here, and he'll be mixing these two together this time. Probably about 50% will be about right, and this is just to apply between the two colours there. Hopefully you can see that, and it starts to blend the two changes, the transition in. He's also going to be doing the exact same effect with the hood, so yellow at the bottom, blending it back up into that green as you move up towards the top of his head. Some care should be taken doing this, but it won't matter too much if you do it quite quickly, as we will still be highlighting it come the end of the video. He's going to be using Agrax Earthshade. This is one of the Citadel shaders, and he's going to be applying this to all the flesh tones here, using the regiment brush, the base brush from Citadel, but which is essentially the regiment brush by Army Painter. So he's going to be applying that quite accurately. Hopefully you can see that he's putting a small amount along all the edges of the flesh, as well as into all of those sort of creases between the fat on his stomach. Benson said he loved the fat on this model, so there's a little bit tidbit for you. He's going to be applying it while I was waffling to the browns, the belt, and the satchels along his waist, as well as the metal, the gold it was applied to there. So he's just going around on a second coat here because he was applying it quite accurate and quite thinly, so he's making sure it all went in those creases. He's now holding the model quite firmly to the table there, and that's just to get a bit more accuracy as he's adding this shade into those areas. He's going to be using Nuln Oil. Yeah, that sounds good. And this is a darker shader by Citadel. So this is sort of like the black shader, and he's going to be applying this to the very, very deepest recesses and on all the darkest parts of the model. So you can see it was applied to all the charred brown there as well. So he's moving on to highlighting now, and he's starting with the flesh, the Cadian Fleshtone here by Citadel, and this is the same as you base coated it in, but he's applying it as the highlight now, so just touching back up the model in all those places the shader went that he doesn't want it to be. You can see he's switched to the detail brush now, so he's been a lot more accurate, and he's making sure he's only getting this highlight on all the raised parts of the model, all those rolls of fat and all the muscles on his legs there, as well as on his face. So that would be his forehead, his nose, his cheekbones, his jawline, fingers. All of his fingers will want highlighting back up in that colour. So moving on to the highlighting of the cloths that we painted previously, we're going to be using Desert Yellow, the Straken Earth, and Ushabti Bone. Not sure how you say that one. So here Benson's trying to demonstrate the mixing percentages of the colours he's going to be highlighting the cloak with. So that's Desert Yellow on the left, mixed 50-50 with the bone. Straken green on the right, again mixed 50-50 with the bone. And in the middle, that was originally a 50-50 mix of the yellow and the green, and then a 50 mix with the bone. So 25 green, 25 yellow, 50% bone. And that's the three colour highlights he's going to be using on this model. So we started by highlighting using the 50 mix of the yellow, and this is for the edges of all the bottom sides of the cloak. Hopefully you can see that. There's a lot of riffles, and you just want to be catching the bottom side of everywhere that was yellow. You then want to move to the 25, 25, 50%, and that's for the middle where we blended those two colours together. And we're going to be doing the same effect here, trying to paint the middle with the mixture of both and highlighting it up and blending it into that yellow. You'll finally be taking the green highlight, that 50 green, 50 bone, and highlighting the green part of the cloak, which is the top, the highest part on both the cloak and the hood. So the same effect was applied to the hood. Hopefully you could see that coming along as in line with the cloak. And don't forget the sleeve, which is really difficult to see when you're watching the video, but it's there. You'll see it with the model in front of yourselves. Next we'll be highlighting the bones on his person, so that those two skulls we saw before, and this is using Karak stone, and just being extra careful around all the bits that are painted, using the detail brush here, leaving the straps, the brown, and making sure not to catch any of those. Also going to be using Karak stone to paint in his nails, so he's got fingernails and toenails on this model. Detail brush and being very, very careful just to catch the edges of his fingers. Back to Leadbelcher for the highlighting of the metal on him, and you want to be catching all of the raised parts of all of his items. Always hilt on the back, don't forget that one. Catch all his armor, like I said, all the points, so the point on his helmet, all of those points on the back of his armor on his arm there. Steel Legion Drabs back to highlight up all the sort of leather browns from before. So those are all the bags along his waistline and the shaft of his hammer. Hopefully you could just see there Benson's painting on some stitching down the cloth there. That's a very small detail, that's very easy to miss, but adds a lot to the model if you paint that up. Dark flesh tones back out now. This is highlighting up the reddy browns that we did before, so the belt across his waist, the belt round his back, and that strap hanging from his leg. Polished gold is going to be used to do the highlighting of the gold, and this is quite tricky to highlight well. It's quite a big flat surface, so make sure you highlight all the points of it around any of the cracks and along the edges of all the sides of that hammerhead. That will give it a nice 3D look and feel. He's going to be doing the final highlight of the bone, and this is using a 50-50 mix of Ushabti bone and Karak stone. I think I might force him to use Army Painter's colours going forth, just so I can pronounce the names if nothing else. Let's see how he feels about that. He's going to be using the bone mixed in with that Legion Steel Drab as well. 50-50 again, and this is just to add the final highlights to those browns. So hopefully you can see that looking a lot more sort of weathered, more realistic straight away there. And that's for all of those satchels around his waist. He's going to be using tan, which is a lighter version of that dark flesh tone, a reddy brown, but much, much paler, and that's to add the final highlight along the top of all of those straps, making it as though the light is catching off the very top edge of all of them. Hopefully you can see that, and even from a distance it's starting to look quite realistic. Steel Legion Drabs out once more. This is to highlight up the darkest areas, the darkest browns, sorry, those charred browns from before. So that's the sheath for his sword, this bit of leather that's on his waist, his sandals are in this colour as well, and we'll just miss out those horns as we'll be highlighting those slightly differently later. Seraphim Sepia, it's a shade. He's going to be using this just to shade back in, make it stand out a little bit better between his fingers and toes there. He's going to be doing the final highlight of the silver using Mithril Silver by Citadel, and this is just to paint the very tips, all the raised points, the very edges. So he's using the detail brush and applying a tiny bit just to give a sort of glint of light hitting those metal places. So same as before, but just the very edges catching all of the sharp points. And he's also pointing on all the studs on those the satchels on the back. It's a small detail, but it adds a lot to the final model there. It's going to be taking Cadian Fleshtone and Kislev flesh here, 50-50 mix, just lightening this up to add the final highlight to the flesh. So here you're going to be using a detail brush, or smaller if you've got shaky hands like myself, and you'll be applying this to the very tips of all of the skin. So that was the tip of his nose, his cheekbones, the edge of his jawline, the edges of all of his fingers, and all the raised parts, just the edge, the sort of centre part of all of the raised parts of his muscles and his flab there. Hopefully you can see that's blending in. And then let's do a final highlight of the flesh. So this is Kislev flesh with that bone colour. I'm bored of trying to pronounce it now. Somebody tell me how you pronounce it in the comments, please. And this is just adding a very thin line just to finish off those highlights. So all the very edges, and just a tiny bit blended into those previous colours before, just making it look like the light's hitting a point. So Pulling out tan again, and this is after all the skin's been done to not paint over this, but this is to paint on his eyeballs, so a tiny small dot on both eyes of tan. And Benson was using his base brush there, just the very tip of it to apply that. The eyeballs are quite large for a small model, because this isn't a very small model, but I myself would have definitely used a detail brush, if not an insane detail brush at that point, but my hands are quite shaky, so you make a judgment call on that. And finally just painting the base black. And stop the clock, 1 hour 50 minutes. I think that's pretty fast for how large this hero actually is, and I'm quite happy with that, especially with the goblins taking me a similar amount of time and being a half if not a quarter the size. So there's the final model. That's Lil Ned completely painted. I think it looks super and amazing that I got Benson to do this for me, so I've got a great model for my game now. So as I mentioned at the start, if you enjoyed it, please do big up Benson, give him a thumbs up below, leave him a comment, anything you've got time to do. Thank you very much for watching.